but that's a fun story.
But it's a fun story. It's a fun story. This is not a fun story. Well, in one sense, I think it could be. Major League Baseball would like to expand to 32 teams. I think they've got the talent pool to do that.
For sure.
The last time baseball expanded, believe it or not, it's now back to 98. That was the Rays and D-backs. And since baseball started to expand, which was back in 61, this is the longest drought. But they're looking to add 2 new teams at some point. The potential new cities include Charlotte, Portland, Vegas. We've heard about them, Montreal, Nashville. There are others, and here's why. Obviously, there's always a why to do this. Major League Baseball, Jay, could be seeking an expansion fee of north of $2 billion. We just saw the Seattle Kraken come into the NHL. I think that was at $750 million. Obviously, MLB franchises are worth more, and you can understand why every owner would be like, yeah, bring them in. We'll take 2 new teams at $2 billion.
Isn't it interesting, Jason Ross, that both MLB and the NBA magically are into the idea of expansion post the 2020 bubble seasons, where franchises lost a ton of money? How can we quickly recoup some of those funds? Well, if we charge 2 teams in each of those leagues, let's say NBA does this too, right. $2 billion, that's $4 billion total that gets spread around, you guessed it, the other governors and owners of those teams. This isn't a play because we think, hey, this is going to help competition, or we really think these markets will bring in a ton of money. It's
a money play.
It's a money play the whole time. And now, so let's stick to MLB here. You go to the Oakland A's. It's why I've always felt that this idea of the A's going to Vegas is kind of stupid, because they clearly want to have a team in Las Vegas, right? They wouldn't be. I feel like the A's are just kind of doing the legwork for MLB on the viability as Vegas.
But you're saying, why take up that market when you know it's already going to be there?
It's already going to be there.
Yeah.
And so there's no point of moving, but you have the A's and the Rays who are both stuck in these really bad stadium situations.
Yeah, and one of those situations, as we said, both of them between Tampa and Oakland, that's the hurdle. That's what Rob Manfred, he was asked about Oakland and their stadium situation, also asked about this expansion. He said, look, we'd like to get to 32. I think that's a goal, whether it's in 5 years and 10 years, whatever it might be, or sooner. But the biggest hurdle is the stadium issues in Tampa, and more pressing is Oakland. And I know the mayor, Libby Schaaf, is really working on it. The city council, everything, they're trying to pass all these things to get everything going forward. It never moves quickly or quick enough. Baseball's getting to a point where they need something to happen here with the Oakland A's, because now all of a sudden Tampa's had bad attendance. But, Jay, this year's been embarrassing for the A's. Just obviously they're a bad team. They've sold off players. Ownership is in question. But nobody's going to the games, and that's a terrible look for the sport, in a sport that needs all the positivity it can get.
Right, and you can't keep operating, A, with that low of attendance, and B, in that stadium. You know, Rob Manfred stating the obvious yesterday that the Oakland Coliseum is no longer a viable MLB stadium. It's really not by today's standards. Again, as a fan, you can go there, watch a ball game, get a dog and a beer, and be done with it.
Sure.
But as far as teams go, when it comes to, and we saw this in Sacramento, you know, with Arco Arena versus Golden One Center, there's so many different advantages to the modern arena when it comes to revenue for these teams. And the A's don't really have that source. I mean, on one end, it's really annoying that they have one of the richest owners in baseball who spends no money. But on the other side, again, it's an antiquated facility. It's just not up to standard. So I think the home run for MLB, Jason, is figure out the stadium in Oakland, get the new stadium there, because that will drive up the A's valuation, tenfold. So you win there, plus you get 2 new stadiums built in cities where you can bring in these fees for expansion, plus, again, the revenue that comes with new stadiums and new teams. I think MLB wants them to figure out in Oakland. I think in the end, the A's will figure it out in Oakland. I think the team has just spent way too much money, and the city council knows, Jason, they're never getting a private investment like this again in the city.
Right. And there's so much tradition with Oakland. I don't know what they want to do with Tampa. That's a curious one, because obviously it's a newer team, not the same kind of history, but they've been good. It's been a well-run organization. You've had people that have just pilfered from them and taken front office people, because Tampa's done a lot of good things in their short time, but it's an area where I bet in Tampa the most popular team is the Yankees. I mean,
or the Red Sox even.
Yeah, just other teams that obviously when the Yankees and Red Sox come in, they get good attendance and they're all fans of the other teams, a little bit similar to what we're seeing with Oakland. But Tampa, I don't know what the solution is for the Rays.
I think you have to honestly look at this, as much as I am not a fan of cities poaching other teams for obvious reasons. Tampa is just not a good baseball market. It's a really poor baseball market. Tropicana was obsolete 25 years ago when the Rays debuted.
Yeah.
It's obsolete now. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of momentum to either give a complete renovation to that stadium, which I don't even know if it's renovatable at this point, and building a new stadium out there. I think the Rays, as much as we talk about the A's, Jason, are much more relocatable than the A's.
Yeah, and if we talked about some of those cities, whether it was Vegas, Portland, Charlotte, Nashville, Montreal have been mentioned for a while. I think the thought of getting to 32 is good for the sport too, as long as you keep having this. Generally when you first expand, it dilutes pitching a little bit because that gets hit in it, but that gives you more offense, which I think brings in fans. 32, I think you logically then, Jay, would have teams of 4 divisions and maybe clean some things up. Maybe you even have more playoff teams, which I think is also good for the sport. I think these are some little subtle things that, one, will make more money for the owners, which, whatever. I don't necessarily care about that. But if it helps the sport, that's good. I think it would, getting it in more markets, but that still sounds very regional to me. If you get a Charlotte, Portland, Vegas teams, that's still regionalizing the sport. It's just, can they continue and need to do a better job of marketing their stars?
Yeah, it doesn't. Put it this way, I don't think adding 2 teams helps or hurts the game itself. It's just, to your point, can they get it together when it comes to marketing, number one? And number 2, they have to make the game more national at this point. You can no longer continue to regionalize baseball the same way that you've done for years. It's just, I keep throwing the word out there, antiquated. Every time I talk about baseball, I feel like I use the word antiquated. It's an antiquated way of marketing the sport. You got to get more national on that level. But I also think I would rather see the Rays in a city like Portland, a city like Charlotte. I think Montreal is obviously ripe for them. There was talks about splitting seasons in Tampa and Montreal, which, was a pipe dream. But Montreal lost the Expos and didn't deserve to. And it's a great baseball market. So if you get them, I think ideally for baseball, the A's stay in Oakland with a new stadium. The Rays relocate to Montreal. You right that wrong. Plus you have another international market. And then you expand into a Portland or a Nashville. Again, cities that are ripe for baseball. I don't think it's a bad thing.
I just don't know how they get it more national, to the point being,
you have to market the stars.
Yeah, we just had Yankees Red Sox. Now I know that's one of the best rivalries. This tomorrow, Giants Dodgers. Now, does Giants Dodgers register in Colorado, in Houston, in Minnesota? Do the Yankees Red Sox register in Houston, Minnesota, these other places now? And whereas, Jay, if the season opener is going to be the Bills and the Rams, I feel like all of America is watching that, and they're not Bills or Rams fans.
No, football's a different beast. It's a completely different beast. You have to really look at, I'll use the King Griffey Jr. example, Jason. I grew up, born and raised in Sacramento. The local teams are the A's and they are the Giants. I grew up loving the Mariners because I loved Griffey. Yeah, my teams were the Dodgers and Mariners as a kid. I had 2 teams because of King Griffey Jr. You have to get back to the point where people are following stars and not necessarily teams. The NBA does a great job with this. How many people follow LeBron James no matter where he plays?
True.
They have to get back to doing that.
Yeah, they really do. Well, it's when